Gina, as far as I know, Lisa and Chris were both supposed to attend, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we'll wait a few minutes then. I think we have everyone now. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll call the meeting of the Board of Public Utilities for the City of Santa Rosa to order. If we may have a roll call, please.
Chairman Galvin.
Here.
Vice Chair Noni. Board Member Badenfort.
Here.
Board Member Grable.
Here.
Board Member Mullen.
Here.
Board Member Watts.
Here.
Board Member Wright.
Here.
Very good. I'll just remind everybody to please mute your phones or your microphones when you're not speaking, and to please put away all cell phones and personal computers. Do we have any statements of abstention by board members? Hearing none. We have no study session. We have 2 sets of minutes for June 4th and June 18th to enter. So we are now taking public comments on the minutes approval. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Perez, do we have anybody?
There are no public comments for this item.
Thank you. The minutes will be approved and entered. We'll move to item 5.1, which is a staff briefing. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Our first and only staff briefing will be a recycled water update, and Deputy Director of Regional Operations, Joe Schwall, will be presenting.
Thank you, Chair Galvin, members of the board. Good afternoon. We can get right into our my update of recycled water storage with the next slide, please. So current conditions we are continuing to receive water from Sonoma Water. We're on track to receiving the 80 million gallons that we had discussed with them earlier in the season, so that's looking good. We are also continuing to manage our geysers flows per the contract to ensure compliance with our obligations there. The repair project for the geysers pipeline, I think the last time we spoke, I spoke too soon. I was excited about an earlier start to that project, but as it turns out, we will be starting that project later in September due to some conflicts with other repair work that's happening in the Calpine system. The Delta Pond levee project is ongoing. The pond is essentially drained. All staff has drained it to the level of our equipment, and now the contractor is taking over and removing the rest of the water and beginning mobilization. So that's going well at the moment. Next slide, please. Regarding irrigation, as you're aware, we instituted alternating irrigation schedule every other day for our agricultural users early or very late in June. There are on allotments, as you're also aware, and we've been continuing to provide all of our users with their allotment usage over a 2-week periods. We're just yesterday and today taking the readings for our 2-week schedule, and the information will be going out to them soon. Regarding ongoing communications, we are also going to be pushing out our site supervisor newsletter that goes out weekly. We'll be sending that also to our ag customers. That they're not always the same person. The site supervisor is sometimes the person out in the field, where the owners, our customers, will now be getting those newsletters. And those newsletters had been focused on urban users, but we'll be adding in agricultural irrigation information as we're able. We'll also be adding the storage curve with that weekly newsletter, so our customers will be receiving the storage curve on a weekly basis. Also, with regards to the curve, we have uploaded that onto the website for ag users, and so that was uploaded yesterday, and we'll be updating that on a weekly basis as well to keep current information available to people should they be looking for it. Next slide, please. Regarding our storage curve, as of yesterday, we were at 310 million gallons. As you can see, we're trending a little bit below the projection that I presented to you about a month ago, but we are tracking it quite well. I think you can see the change in the slope of the curve there in very early June when we instituted the every other day alternating schedule for irrigation, which has helped us really kind of slow the overall use of the water supply that we have, so that we're able to produce the water and as well as needed, so that the supply doesn't drop below our operating minimums. So that's where we are. I'd be happy to take any questions at this point.
Thank you, Deputy Director Schwal. Any questions from the board or comments? Okay, we are now taking public comments on item 5.1. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Perez, do we have anyone?
There are no public comments at this time.
Very good, thank you. That'll close the staff briefing, 5.1. We have one item on the consent calendar. I'd be happy to entertain a motion to.
I'll move the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Motion by Board Member Badenfort, seconded by Board Member Watts to approve item 6.1. May we have we will now take public comments on item 6.1. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Perez, do we have anyone?
We do not.
Okay, will you please conduct a roll call vote?
Chairman Galvin,
Aye.
Vice Chair Noni, Board Member Badenfort,
Aye.
Board Member Grable,
Aye.
Board Member Mullen,
Aye.
Board Member Watts,
Aye.
Board Member Wright.
Aye.
Very good. Passes unanimously with one absence. We will now move to our report item 7.1. Director Burke.
Thank you, Chair Galvin and members of the board. Item 7.1 is our subcontractor addition to the Laguna Treatment Plant chillers and climate control upgrades at administration and annex buildings. And supervising engineer Tracy Duenas with our capital projects engineering team will be making the presentation.
Good afternoon, Chair Galvin, members of the board. This is Tracy Duenas with the City of Santa Rosa Capital Projects Engineering Division. Thank you for your efforts regarding this item. Today I bring before you the subcontractor addition report item for the Laguna Treatment Plant chillers and climate control upgrades at administration and annex building. I just wanted to preface that this item, as far as we know, staff has recognized this item as the newest item. It dates back 20 years of never being brought before the board in terms of a subcontractor addition item. So with that, I'll go into the background analysis and with the recommendation. Next slide, please. So at the request of the city in 2016, the city requested Costa Engineers to provide a condition assessment of 4 existing air-cooled chillers at the Laguna Treatment Plant. Evaluation focused on chillers serving the admin building, the annex building, and the recently constructed combined heat and power building. This assessment's efforts discovered that the chillers in general had a higher normal frequency of maintenance and need for repair, with one boiler essentially inoperable and the other overtaxed and undersized. Findings deemed basically the equipment exceeded its effective service life, and the recommendation was for replacement at the admin and the annex building were warranted and appropriate. Assessment also focused on upgrades to the building's existing energy management and climate control system to or a more robust industrial type system. And it should also be noted that the chillers serving the admin building controls the climate of the laboratory section housing the staff and equipment. Next slide, please.
Tracy, hold on for just a second. We're just going to reset the slideshow because it's the wrong screen. Hold on. Okay, Tracy, thank you.
Perfect. I'm on slide 3, Roberta. Perfect, thank you. So this slide just gives a general overview, aerial, of the location of the improvements. There's essentially a chiller located east of the annex building and 2 located north of the admin building. Next slide, please. So pursuant to the recommendations of Costa's report, engineering pursued to develop a public contract with the scope to replace the following: 2 50-ton chillers at the admin building, 1 50-ton at the annex building, 2 condensing boilers at the admin building, and upgrades to the programmable logic controller system. Next slide, please. So in August of 2019, the board approved recommendation by staff for the sole source specification of the PLC Siemens equipment. This equipment is similarly used throughout the plant's operations. In addition to increasing the, essentially the durability of the building's temperature and energy management controls, this equipment is easily learned by plant staff as they are fully conversed in Siemens technology and operations. Next slide, please. So in October 2019, the board approved construction contract 2105 to Matrix HG of Novato, California, in the amount of $1,004,198. Matrix was the lowest of three responsible bidders at approximately 25% over the engineering estimate. These photos depict the boilers of subject to be replaced. Next slide, please. So moving forward, in November 2019, the city issued a notice to proceed to Matrix, and then between March and May, project was temporarily suspended as a response to the county public health order regarding COVID-19. In March of 2020 as well, Matrix submitted a request for the subcontractor addition, proposing the contractor Wanderlich Malik Engineering, that they would be responsible for the PLC panel building, programming, testing, and commissioning work. So as further discussion with Matrix and information gathering, and with respect to the contract sole sourced, the Siemens material, it was clear that at the time of bid, Matrix assumed that the vendor the plant has been exclusively using for over the past 12 years, essentially for acquiring Siemens equipment and technical support, they would perform that PLC work. This vendor was not explicitly stated in the contract. However, Matrix essentially indicated they failed to verify the vendor's ability to comply with the public contractor requirements after the bid opening. And then further, essentially, they did not list them as a subcontractor. And once they realized the issue, they are forthcoming and requested the subcontractor addition by a different contractor able to comply with requirements. Next slide, please. So in review of public contract code, section 4104 essentially provides in part all subcontracts in excess of 0.5% of the total amount of a bid are required to be listed in the bid. Moving on to 4106, and it states in part, if a prime contractor fails to specify a subcontractor for work under the contract in excess of 0.5% of the bid price, the prime contractor agrees that it's fully qualified to perform that portion itself and shall perform that portion itself. Now, reaching out and clarifying with Matrix, they did disclose that the subcontractor was not listed to perform the PLC work. The value of the work is stated at $125,000, which exceeds that 0.5%. They also confirmed that they are not qualified to perform this type of work. Next slide, please. Moving on to 4110, states essentially in violation of 4104 and 4106 subjects the contractor to cancellation of the contract or an assessment of a penalty up to 10% of the value of the subcontractor work. These penalties, where these penalties are assessed, the owner must provide the contractor a 5-day notice and an opportunity for a hearing. This hearing would be publicly conducted at a BPU as the ward authority. However, pursuant to city code, the determination by the BPU at the hearing may be appealable to the city council. Thus, the value of the penalty is up to approximately $12,500. Lastly, section 4109 provides an owner can permit an unlisted subcontractor to perform work only in cases of public emergency or necessity, and then only after finding reduced to writing as a public record of a ward authority setting forth the facts constituting the emergency or necessity. Next slide, please. So staff's analysis of canceling the contract provides the following. The project completion would be delayed past 2020. Cancellation is highly uncommon, undesired, and a lengthy process. As I stated previously, as far as department staff's aware of, going back 20 years, there's no previous history of actually canceling a public contract that Public Works is aware of. Obviously, this decision would also be subjected from the contractor for potential claims and need for potential initial further legal counsel. The estimated cost to cancel and essentially repackage another project is estimated between 30 and 50,000. The basis of this value is to have the existing construction site reassessed by an engineer, perform a field assessment for the work performed to date. They would need to re-engineer, repackage a contract document, and then the additional to reflect the said changes, and then all the administrative time thereafter to re-advertise and execute a new contract. And then staff's estimated the completion date would push it to probably late spring of 2021. Finally, the cost staff estimates associated with collecting the penalty would be potentially equal, if not greater than the actual cost of the $12,500 penalty. This would be in terms of administrative efforts required of Transportation Public Works, City Attorney's Office, and finance staff, as well as the efforts required for the public hearing conducted at either BPU or in the council forum. Next slide, please. So this city's experience to date with Matrix, they have been very forthright. As I previously mentioned, once they are aware of the error, they came forth. They've been proactive with the project and very collaborative. They are committed to obviously completing the project on time within the allowed contract specified time. It should also be noted that our understanding that our positive opinion of Matrix performance is shared by the Department of Public Works Facility Maintenance Department, who also has a contract with Matrix to provide as needed maintenance services. And in the end, staff does deem that Matrix emission really of the listed subcontractor is an inadvertent error with an assumed origin derived from the sole source element of the contract documents. Next slide, please. So proceeding along, the board may elect three items here. One would be permit the addition of this unlisted subcontractor, Wunderlich Malik Engineering, as well as two, waive the penalties in the amount of $12,500, which is 10% of the subcontracted work. Or the board may also elect to permit the addition of the unlisted subcontractor, Wunderlich Malik, and assess penalties against Matrix in the amount up to $12,500. Or lastly, the board may elect to terminate the contract and proceed with recommendations of the actions required essentially to execute a new contract with a new contractor. Next slide, please. So with that, it is recommended by the Transportation Public Works Department and the Water Department that the Board of Public Utilities by resolution 1, permit the addition of subcontractor Wunderlich Malik Engineering of Pleasant, California to the Laguna Treatment Plant Chillers and Climate Controls Project Contract 2105 due to public necessity, and 2, elect not to assess potential penalties against the prime contractor Matrix HD of Novato, California. Next slide. And with that, I would love to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Duenas. Board member questions or comments, please? Board member Mullen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions. I'm trying to understand how we got to where we are today with the action item in front of us relative to the contractor and the performance. So if I could just sort of go through my questions and just try to get up to speed on how we got to where we are. So I understand the process. Staff did a great job explaining that the steps that got us to where we are. We had a bid bond that they submitted when they submitted their bid. We awarded the bid to them as the lowest responsible bidder. checked off that box. Then we're into the performance part of it, and they start their work and discover that they're missing the subcontractor needed to complete the work. I'm not sure what percentage the work is at this stage, and that would be one question I have. Let me try to run through all my questions, and maybe they can be answered in a sort of a comprehensive response. Then we're into the performance part of it, and we have a performance bond to assure that they do the work as required. If they don't, we have some remedies with a performance bond. So the recommendation to their position is we inadvertently left it out of the bid, and we're prepared to make good on it. They apparently have a working relationship with us on previous contracts or current contracts at the plant, and they want to make it right. I understand that. The issue is to get to where we are and bring us to the action item now. We've incurred some cost, staff time, staff attorney time, reviewing it, trying to come up with a plan of action and the recommendation we have in front of us. We're essentially eating that cost, whatever that cost might be. I don't know offhand how much time we've invested in that, but we're eating that cost. The contractor is basically saying, oops, I left that out, and here's our proposed remedy. And then we have to do all the sort of the legwork to be in compliance with the contract code, et cetera. So one of my questions is, why are we eating the cost? I understand the process to go through and assess the penalty is another step, and there's additional costs associated if we want to go forward. So my bottom line is the contract is whatever percent it is completed. And I'm not sure what the expectation is that it will be completed in X number of days, and what our expectation or anticipation is for possible change orders. Every construction project has the potential for change orders. If when they come in there and this new sub comes in and says, oh, by the way, we're going to need an extra $50,000. I'm just throwing a number out there, that to complete the work because there's a problem with this, or this. We're then faced with the additional costs, as we are every time there's a change order. But again, the contractor said, I'll do the work for this amount of money, and now we've allowed him to bring in a sub with no penalty. We've eaten the cost to do that, and then there's the potential for us to eat some additional costs relative to change orders. So I guess my overall question is there some way we can sort of shoehorn this in to sort of hold it over the head of the contractor until they complete the work? If they complete the work within and the contract exceeded our engineer's estimate, which I understand from one project to the next, and the bidding climate and everything else, that there's the potential for that. But is there some way for us to finesse this so that we get to hold that $12,500 kind of over their head until the project's done? And once it's done, then we say, okay, we're happy with the work, no harm, no foul, and we write them their final check and we go about our business. If not, and there's additional change orders, can we use that $12,500 potential penalty as some way to credit against any future change orders for the remainder of the project? That's kind of what I'm looking at.
Yes, Chair Mullen, to answer the first question, the percentage of the subcontractor work to date regarding this item is 0. They were very clear. We put them on notice. Not one step of work related to that can occur until we had an executed contract with the appropriate subcontractor. So nothing has been done regarding this work so far. Item 2, I'll defer to Attorney Burke, but as my understanding, the only contractual mechanism to hold contractor accountable in terms of payment would be through the contract. And through the contract, backing into it, we are held to the public contract code. So essentially, we don't have, unless the award authority gives us the direction to hold them accountable now, proceed with the penalty process via the hearing, via the notice, and we have the authorization to do such. Technically, there's no other provisions as far as I am aware of that would allow us to technically hold monies against the contractor at this point. And at this point, I'd like to defer to Attorney Burke, if I could, for any further or clarifying items that I may have missed.
So your general counsel, Molly McLean, promised me that there wouldn't be any questions today. So if I'm understanding you, Board Member Mullen, I think what you might be suggesting is staff is recommending in its resolution that because the contractor has been forthright and because if you were to impose the penalty, that there would be further cost and some delay. Are you suggesting that that your board approve a resolution conditionally waiving the penalty, contingent on successful completion of the project and no unexpected costs?
Sort of. What I'm probing about is we're considering waiving $12,500 worth of penalties that could be assessed based on the actions that have occurred. And my question is, rather than just wipe it away, can we sort of hold it kind of in an escrow account or in some sort of account that says, we're going to set this aside for now and see how the project proceeds the rest of the way. And if it proceeds as we expected it to be at the start, with no additional change orders or anything like that, then we're going to wipe it away. But if we hit snags along the way and you come back to us and say, we need a $30,000 change order or something, then we're going to raise it back and offset some of that additional cost that may occur. That's what I'm kind of probing.
So to be honest, and maybe staff knows, I think you might be able to do that. I think to a certain extent, though, it may be apples and oranges. If your board decides today to waive the penalty per staff's recommendation, and then there's other issues with the contract, that seems to me that it could just be a separate issue. But I hear what you're saying, and frankly, I'm not aware of whether there's any prohibition on going forward. But I think you're gonna, if you're gonna want to impose that, I think you're going to have to go through the hearing process, and that's the concern that staff has, is the further cost and delay.
Sure, and perhaps, and again, I'm just one member of this body. I'm just raising this as a discussion item. But if maybe the staff can shed some light on whether, again, what percentage is the work done now of the total project, and what's our expectation going forward? Is this a pretty straightforward contract? As far as they're replacing some chillers, they're taking the old ones out, putting the new ones in and hooking them up. And is the expectation is pretty straightforward work, and we expect it to proceed smoothly through the rest of the contract? Is that a fair estimate or summary?
Chair Mullen, yeah, I would say that's correct. The percentage of overall project completions running around 60, possibly 70 at this point. They're on schedule to complete late fall. We've had incurred change orders. They are legitimate. They are design related or change conditions. As we stated earlier, their performance has been nothing more than forthcoming and very collaborative in working through issues. So we've had projects where we swapped out PLC and they are straightforward. And I guess for, general sense, yes, we're replacing chillers and condensers and the PLC system. We don't really anticipate any real issues, but as of this point, like I stated, this is our first experience with Matrix. Another department's currently working with them, but as far as I stated, our history with them has been very positive.
Okay. Again, I'm just raising this as a discussion item, so I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Mullen.
This is Jason Nuts. If I could just chime in a minute, I apologize as I'm not available to participate on video, but I'm not aware of any mechanism for us to be able to set aside a penalty, in essence, in escrow. I'm not aware that that's a possible option for us. I think our only options are remedies that are existing through the contract. So if they, for whatever reason, don't conform to the quality of the workmanship or the time associated with the work, then we have remedies to be able to impose additional fines or work-related fees to try to recover our costs to make it right. But I don't believe we have any opportunity to be able to create the set-aside side agreement outside of the contract.
Okay, thank you.
Jason, could we not pass a resolution that allows for the substitution and just holds in abeyance the issue of the penalty? So it's not putting money aside, it's just telling the contractor that no decision yet has been made, although they are potentially on the hook for a $12,500 penalty. But the board at this point is deciding not to levy the penalty, but also not to waive the right to potentially to levy the penalty later, depending upon performance or completion time, delay, whatever.
Yeah, Chair Galvin, I've never seen that before. To me, because that's not consistent with our existing contract, I would think that would be difficult to craft to be able to protect the city's best interest as well as the contractor's interest. So, I would really need to defer to our attorney's office to make a decision whether or not language could be developed to be able to do that, given our current contract says you will either waive or you will apply the penalty.
And Chair Galvin and Assistant City Manager Nutt, this is Jennifer Burke. I do know that staff did a lot of work with the City Attorney's Office to really look at what our options are. And I think they were really able to narrow it down in terms of with the omission and the penalty, it's either make this finding and allow the subcontractor to be able to be added, or decide to go ahead and add with the penalty. I think those are really kind of what our options are. And it doesn't have to be that entire penalty amount. It could be an up to, but as was stated, we would have to then come back with a public hearing. And so it's going to be a further process. So I don't believe, and Assistant City Attorney Burke could also chime in on this, but my understanding is these are really the options that we have at this point based on their research. If you want us to look at an option to hold something in abeyance, we would really have to go back and do a lot more work to look at that and bring this item back at a future board meeting.
And I take it that would potentially delay completion of the project if the contractor is waiting still for that subcontractor to be approved.
I would have to defer to staff on the effects on the timeline, but I do know that we were wanting to bring this item forward, soon, so that we could ensure that the project would be complete on time this year. But I don't know if Supervising Engineer Duenas has anything to add on that.
So in speaking with the contractor, this report item's coming at a good time. They haven't had the need thus far to have this subcontractor on board. They are at a point now, though, at this point moving forward, if we're going to delay it, the project at our own discretion for another month or two, that'll just push everything back. So we're sort of coming to a, meeting at the same point that we will in effect start delaying their schedule.
Board Member Mullen?
Yes, thank you. Last thing I want to do is delay the project and delay the completion. If we're past the 50% mark and we're kind of looking for the home stretch here, the last thing I want to do is slow down $1 million project over $12,000. But I just want to convey back, I appreciate the discussion, but I also want the contractor to understand the anxiety that at least this board member has over this process and how we got to where we are. And if they expect to continue to have a relationship with us going forward, I would hope this is the last time.
Fair enough. Any other board member questions or comments? Board Member Wright?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, our PLC system, I believe we used to use the same PLCs for our water and our wastewater system. And it's a proprietary system. They're all the same. And so it's important from an operational standpoint that we have a subcontractor in there that actually understands how to use and wire and integrate the PLC into our system. And I don't think we want to force the contractor to try and wing it and not use the subcontractor to do the work correctly. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Any other board member questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Board Member Grable. I would just like to, from my background in construction and as a general contractor, these things aren't ideal, but I would say it's not, it seems to be, in terms of the cost benefit, administratively cumbersome and not to our benefit to try to rectify this in process right now. As much as it is frustrating, I do think that things need to move forward, and it's not perfect, but I don't see the cost benefit in holding it up or trying to leverage the $12,500 bond amount or anything like that, and put additional staff resources and or council legal resources toward that. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Any other comments by the board? At this point, then, I will take public comments on item 7.1. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Secretary Burke, do we have anyone?
There are no members of the public with their hand raised.
Thank you. I will then ask for a motion and a second to approve the resolution that we have.
I move to allow a substitution of a contractor or a new subcontractor for PLC work to the chiller contract at the plant.
Second.
Motion by Board Member Wright, seconded by Board Member Mullen. May we have a roll call vote, please?
I want to confirm that was a second by Board Member Grable.
Correct.
Oh, I'm sorry. Board Member Grable.
Yes.
Okay, let me do roll call vote. Chairman Galvin?
Aye.
Board Member Badford?
Aye.
Board Member Grable?
Aye.
Board Member Mullen?
Aye.
Board Member Watts?
Aye.
Board Member Wright?
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Good discussion. Appreciate the comments. We'll now move to item number 8. We're now taking public comments on item number 8. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Do we have anyone wishing to address us on public comments, Secretary Perez?
There are no public comments for this item.
Thank you. We have no referrals. We have no written communications. Do we have any subcommittee reports? Hearing none. Any board member reports? Hearing none. Director's report.
Thank you, Chair Galvin, members of the board. I have a couple items to update the board on today. First, we wanted to let the board know and the public know that the Santa Rosa Plain Groundwater Sustainability Agency, or GSA, will be hosting a public workshop via Zoom on July 29th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. to provide an opportunity for members of the public, including well owners, agricultural interests, and other interests to learn about groundwater in the Santa Rosa Plain Basin and help define local sustainable groundwater management. As the board may recall, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act of 2014 required us to form a GSA and develop a groundwater sustainability plan, which is due to the state by January 31st, 2022. The act also included requirements for targeted outreach by the GSAs to affected well owners and residents during the development of the plan. And so this is one of multiple opportunities that the public will have to provide input on the development of the groundwater sustainability plan. If anyone's interested in participating, they can go to sonomacountygroundwater.org and clicking on the link to the Santa Rosa Plain Basin. Again, that's sonomacountygroundwater.org. And they can RSVP to participate in the meeting on the 29th. The second item I wanted to update the board on is Brown and Caldwell, consulting engineers that work closely with us, will be presenting a paper at this year's Water Environment Federation's annual national conference, which features city staff accomplishments at the Laguna Treatment Plant. The paper's title is Old Cogen is Dead, Determining the Best Use of Biogas in a Dynamic Environment. And it focuses on options and opportunities that communities have to optimize the use of biogas in the face of changing technology and market conditions. The presentation points out the several methods being used at our Laguna Treatment Plant to make the most of biogas being produced, including co-digestion of high-strength waste to increase biogas, blending of natural gas to optimize generation capacity, taking advantage of grant funding, and battery storage and electricity time of use capabilities. This exposure at such a high-profile industry conference is both a source of pride and recognition of the high level of planning and operations at which city staff are working. And I do want to recognize that our very own Joe Schwal is a co-author of the paper. So really a big deal for us to be recognized at a very big national conference. And then last, I wanted to provide the board an update on a number of efforts that we are doing to be prepared for the wildfire season and potential public safety power shutoffs. Both, as the board is well aware, both regional and our local systems have robust backup power supplies and systems that allow us to continue our essential operations during an interruption to the PG&E power supply. Most of these backup power supplies are stationary and located at the several water facilities that we have, like the Laguna Treatment Plant, our water pump stations, and sewer lift stations. To ensure that these stations have redundancy, we have also procured rental mobile generators to assist both regional and local operations in the event that we would have a mechanical failure this year. Our local operations continues to work closely with Santa Rosa Fire as we enter the fire season. We anticipate that there will be many red flag warnings, unfortunately, this year due to the abnormally dry winter. We've already started operating our tanks and reservoirs at our summer levels, and water and the fire departments, we are discussing projects that might impact the water system and how we can make sure that we have adequate water supply throughout the fire season. We're also coordinating maintenance efforts with Calpine to make sure that water is available during the fire season from our recycled water system as well. And then we continue to refine and streamline our DOC activations. We have learned quite a bit over this last couple of years, not only from the Tubbs fire, but also through activations for PSPS's last season, as well as the Kincaid fire. We really took a lot of the opportunities to learn and embrace an opportunity to assign all of our incident commanders, both from regional and local, to be at our local DOC during the activations this last year. And this really was valuable training for our incident command staff. And so we continue to look at ways that we can improve our DOC operations and train our water staff to be ready and available. So I just wanted, I know the board had asked in the past, kind of, are we looking forward to and preparing for PSPS season and the wildfire season? And we have put a lot of effort into being ready and being prepared, and especially understanding how we're going to respond in light of also the COVID pandemic that's occurring. So that is my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Any board member questions or comments?
Yeah, this is board member Grable. My question is just regarding staff capacity. Are we looking at, in just for my information, are we looking at contingencies if we do have, say, a COVID outbreak or an exposure amongst our essential staff, especially in terms of the field staff that run the infrastructure and operations and are critical during a wildfire event? Do we have an emergency staffing contingency in the case that we may lose a large portion of our staff just to quarantine or to exposure or in terms of having a COVID outbreak itself amongst staff? I'm dealing with that in my own work and planning for those contingencies, and it's incredibly difficult. And I just wondered if we had that internally.
Yeah, thank you, Board Member Grable. That's a great question. And it is a very big concern that we have to ensure that not only for the water department, but citywide, that we're keeping our employees safe, that we're implementing all the measures that we can, including facial coverings, personal protective equipment, social distancing, to really ensure that we are trying to prevent such an outbreak if we can. We also have policies and procedures in place citywide for how we ensure that health checks are done, including temperature taking, and if anyone's exhibiting any type of symptoms, they're not to come in. We also have protocols for folks to be quarantining to definitely ensure that we're limiting exposure as much as possible. We do recognize that this is a big challenge, especially for an operational department. And so we do have the ability to staff down if needed and keep systems running, but we've also have the ability to call upon mutual aid if need be. And we have been having coordinated discussions with the local water contractors in this area as well, so that if something like this were to occur, we're also exploring options where we could continue to have support from those other agencies. So it is definitely a big concern that we're continuing to look at and try to be as best prepared we can and put as many safety measures as we can in place to prevent any type of outbreak if we can.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear. I was more concerned about the mutual aid, but that's exactly what I wanted to hear. I know fire departments have that sort of structure already set up, but it's wonderful to hear that we're talking to our other expert partners in field operations and water. So yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other board member questions or comments? All right, we're now taking public comments on item number 13. If you wish to make a comment via Zoom, please raise your hand. If you're dialing in via telephone, please dial *9 to raise your hand. Do we have anything, Secretary Perez?
We do not.
All right, that will conclude item number 13. So we will be adjourning in a moment. I want to thank Assistant City Attorney Burke for being with us. Hope it wasn't too taxing for you, and you can tell Molly that she can't go on vacation anymore. So anyhow, thanks for being here. We appreciate your expertise. Thank you all. Be safe, be healthy, and we are adjourned.